Welcome to Lionheart Talks, a series of podcasts from Lionheart.
Trigger warning, this episode contains references around the subject of suicide. Hello and welcome to the next in the second series of podcasts of Lionheart Talks. And today I am joined by the wonderful Steve Lees. It's a great pleasure to have Steve along. I've probably known Steve quite a while as part of my Lionheart journey, and Steve is the Lionheart ambassador. I'm Melissa Gough-Rundle and I'm head of development here at Lionheart, and I would like now to hand over to Steve, who will give us a bit of an introduction. Welcome, Steve.
Afternoon, Melissa. Hope you're well. Yeah, I think we go back a little bit. I think it's 8 years since I became a Lionheart ambassador, so my career's changed over that period a few times, actually. I'm a chartered surveyor, now employed by RICS, but I think when I started my journey, I worked within residential survey as a surveyor. So thank you for the kind offer to have a chat with you today.
It's a real pleasure, Steve. And talking a bit more about being an ambassador, it's great to have you on board. But what was it that actually inspired you to become a Lionheart ambassador?
It's an interesting one, Melissa. So I think life events and people that I worked with. I think I need to go back to go forward to tell you why I got to that conclusion. So my life story a little bit, but I'll try and do an abridged version. My parents were really supportive of me to have what was called a proper career. So my dad worked in a period where every time there was a recession, he ended up losing his job. So I said, we need to get a proper job here, Steve, something you can rely on going forward. I remember my careers advisor saying, "What do you like doing, Steve?" I said, "I like building stuff out of Lego and I like history." And they said, "Right, building surveying's a good career for you." And it was. I went to university, loved it, went to do what was day release then, and went to work for Wolverhampton Dudley Breweries, Banks's Brewery, looking at their estates department. And I thought this is definitely a job for me. Worked in a little bit of building control and thought, yeah, I like doing this. So mum and dad made some sacrifices, put me through university, and I got qualified in the late 90s, and it was great. And I got involved with a small firm and got my APC and became a surveyor, and everything was rosy. But a few years into the job, I thought, it's not exactly the job that I thought it should be, and I put myself under a bit of pressure to make sure I met with the expectations of my employer and deadlines, and not really getting anything wrong, and not really feeling comfortable. And looking back, I had some really good employees at the time, but I didn't want to show any sign of weakness. So to cut a long story short, I got to a point in my career where I'd got a young family, I was married, the mortgage, the dream on the outside for a lot of my friends and my family. And the pressure got to me quite a lot, feeling like I've got to do the best I can here. Didn't want to go through a recession like my dad experienced. And over 2 periods, the residential world, the financial world goes through highs and lows and dips. And I went through 2 periods of redundancy, whereby I was fortunate enough not to lose my job, but going through the whole process and seeing friends and colleagues lose their job became really hard for me. So how does that link to Lionheart? Well, I realised that going through those difficult periods in my career, it's good to speak to people. And I was aware of Lionheart, but again, a bit of a life event got in the way, and I got through that and thought, yeah, I'm going to start to give back. So hopefully that gives a bit of an idea. I'm happy to divulge if you want me to about what happened next in my life. I'm sure
we will, Steve, because it's fantastic that you ended up with Lionheart, and it was wonderful that you found us when you needed us most, which is great. But there was that life event, wasn't there? There was that turning point in your life,
Mm-hmm.
which did it was a massive wake-up call for you because you were struggling at the time. Do you want to go into a bit more detail about that?
Yeah, absolutely, because that's a point in my life, and hopefully may help at least one person out there. Or I'm sure I'm not alone. We all face challenges in our lives. So going back to what I mentioned earlier, that sort of pressure in wanting to do the best job I possibly could sort of consumed me. I wanted to keep paying the mortgage. I wanted to ensure I did the job the best I could. I didn't want to feel like I let my parents down. I remember before they sort of encouraged me to sacrifice a lot. I thought, I can't have a U-turn in my career. I've got to do the best I possibly can. I don't want to make mistakes. I've got to do the productivity. I've got to do the number of surveys that the business wanted me to do. So I felt I was in a real catch-22 situation. Didn't want to give up, but that enjoyment that I spoke about at the start of my career sort of started to dissipate. I was working non-stop. Work was consuming me. I was going on holiday and taking my phone and checking emails and thinking about work, thinking, am I going to get called for an interview? How's the business doing? Got a young daughter at the time who's 20 now, so 10 at the time. And I wasn't really focusing on her because I was thinking about work and getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning and doing the work. And it got to a point where I was that concerned about making mistakes. I was getting up in the early hours of the morning and driving back to properties and lifting drains and getting keys back from agents and rechecking properties. I remember looking at a property where there was no issue with it at all, but I woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning and thought, did I check for knotweed at the back? I'm sure I did. In the car, my wife's, what are you doing here? And it started to affect our relationship. Even though she stuck with me, I was disengaged. And then one day I came back from work and saw a lump on the side of my neck, and I thought, oh, that's a bit strange. And it's a bit of a sliding doors moment for many reasons. But my mother-in-law was a nurse, and she said, I don't think that's a problem, Steve, but go to the GP, get it checked out. My initial reaction was, oh, I haven't got time to go to the GP. I've got work tomorrow or this afternoon, and I'm not going to get to do X, Y, and Z. But fortunately, there was an appointment cancelled, said, come along straight away, Steve. So I went and got it checked out, spoke to the doctor and said, it's not what you probably think it is, Steve, but worth getting it checked out. And then we had a conversation, hey, how are you more generally? And that's the first time I opened up and said, I think I'm sort of self-diagnosing it, but I think I'm suffering from anxiety and if not, definitely stress or some sort of mental health. And I played it down. I said, it's nothing major. He said, no, it is, Steve. Tell me what's going on. And I said about the hours that I was working, going back and checking and being absolutely single-minded around work and obsessed with it, I think. And he said, yeah, we can help and that there are options out there, but you can't be seen really for any sort of talking therapy for weeks, and the NHS is still probably in that sort of space. So that's when I said, I'm going to try and reach out and speak to Lionheart. I need to address this. I don't really want to speak to my employer. Again, don't want to show any sign of weakness. So had all the tests, went to the hospital, had a biopsy. Didn't really think anything about it. Had a follow-up call with the GP around my anxiety and stress. But in the meantime, I was called back to the hospital. I said to my wife, I said, that's brilliant service. I only went 2 weeks ago for these tests. I'll see what they say, and hopefully it's just an inflammation. I can have some pills and I can get on with it. So when I went back to see the consultant, I was the last one in the room and went to the toilet actually. My wife was in the room and somebody came and said, hasn't he been told yet? So my wife probably knew what was coming before I did, and there was a manila folder put on the table. Then went to see the consultant, and I'll never forget it. There was a student in there, and there was a clinical nurse in there, and it was me and my wife in this small room. And I still hadn't clocked it. I was thinking, oh God, I've been waiting here for 2 hours. I've got this home survey to sign off when I get home. And then the consultant just flipped it over and said, right, Steve, we've had the results back. You've got throat cancer. And at that point, my whole world sort of went into serious focus. A bit like for the older listeners, when a television shuts down, you're looking straight down. Oh my God. And probably not going to believe this, Melissa. My first reaction wasn't, I've got cancer, I could die. My first reaction was, that's great. I've got a reasonable excuse not to go into work, which I don't know how you feel about that, but that's quite a reaction. So
that is such a reaction, isn't it? But I think telling about the amount of stress that you're under
Yeah. So I said at the time, is that, why me? I do like a drink, but not, just a social drinker. At the time, playing football, diet was reasonable, body mass index was okay, non-smoker. I was like, what is this? And they said, look, we need to work out exactly the root cause, which was HPV, which young boys can have injections for now. Girls already had the injection for cervical cancer, but boys, since in the last 10 years, it's great that that development's happened. So that would have probably really helped me to have that injection, which wasn't available to HPV generally. Um, but in weeks to come, I did ask the consultant, said, what was the trigger for this? And they said, a lot of people do have HPV. It's quite common. Very rarely sort of mutate into cancer, but stress is a real, you weren't looking after yourself, probably sleep wise, etc. The stress probably triggered that. It was never proven, but it was a strong suggestion that that was the actual cause. So weirdly, having cancer was probably one of the best things that ever happened to me. Made me take stock of my life, to speak to people, and I thought, I can add my story to all the great work that the Lionheart ambassadors do at the moment to make it real. I think of myself as a normal guy. Um, and my real message is to people is look out for the signs early, because you think you're invincible when you're in your 20s and 30s. But um, having cancer was probably a really good thing, because I don't think I'd be married now. I don't think I'd be appreciating my friends and family and my daughter, etc., and probably helped me sort of change my career direction. So, yeah, still a surveyor, but I'm doing slightly different things without putting so much pressure on myself and enjoying it again. Most definitely, yeah.
Which is lovely to hear, because, it's not always the way that when people get a cancer diagnosis that that's necessarily the effect it has. But for you to see that as an opportunity to bring everything into sharp focus,
Mhm.
and really change the way that you were doing things as well. But also the initial reaction, which we both agree is a bit weird, is that you thought, oh, great, now I've got an excuse to just take my foot off the gas, which just probably proves how stressed you were at the time and to what extent it had had that impact on you. And
Yeah.
that's just unbelievable that you'd managed to get yourself to that point. Coming out the other side, though, and you said that you opened up, you got in touch with Lionheart. Did it feel easier off the back of the cancer diagnosis? Did it then feel easier to explain to your employer that you had probably been overdoing it and that it was time for you to reevaluate your life choices and your work life balance?
Yeah, I think I'd got myself into such a circle. And again, when I've said this to people at the time and since, having that valid excuse, not to, well, it wasn't an excuse, but that's why I saw it. I haven't got to focus on work. People will forgive me for having time off. And in retrospect, when I spoke to my firm, when I was having more clarity of thought, they would never have done that. I know that they're really good people. I've worked for some really good employers, and the dial is changing. But I know, for what I've said to them at the time, I need to ease off. This is what I'm doing. It's irrational what I'm doing. I'm trying to protect the fact that I've never had any claims against me, and that was a really big thing. And weirdly, the more years I went without having a claim, the bigger it got. At one point, I thought I'd love to have a claim just to show that life continues the next day. But yeah, it was good. I think I said, my bosses were brilliant with me, gave me all the time I needed, even though I came back slightly earlier to start to do a bit of auditing work, because I couldn't sit at home watching daytime television. That wasn't for me. But I've seen it now, and I've said to people when I've seen similar traits, speak to your employer. They'd rather you were in work and be happy and manage your workload, um, than you being off for a period of time, because they've lost you into the system anyway. And getting good surveyors is really challenging. So yeah, I think my biggest takeaway was open up earlier, work with others earlier, and I think the dial's definitely changed. It's a sign of strength now that people and trust, and it definitely hasn't hindered my career by being open around it. I think that's a fear for other people that, if you open up to the fact that you, that you are vulnerable, and I still have moments where I still have the knot in the stomach. I always use the analogy of Antiques Roadshow when I was at school. Oh God, I've got school tomorrow. Imagine having that knot in the stomach. I had that
Yeah.
every day when I was in work, and that went away through talking. Talking would have potentially, I can never clinically prove it, but I think if I'd have addressed it when I saw it becoming a problem,
Yeah.
I would never have been in that. And I think my dad's era and his dad's era of get your head down, don't talk about it, just stiff upper lip type thing, that's going on. I've seen the change. And if your employee, I shouldn't really say, but if your employee isn't open to helping you, it might be time to start to look at a different employer, I would say. Hopefully they're in the minority now. So.
It's 10 years since you've been in this situation, and quite obviously you've seen a massive shift, and you were really glad that you started that conversation, that you had that conversation with your employer and explained. And looking back on it now, you know that they wouldn't have looked at you negatively. And do you think it's in your opinion, it's just going to get better, that people are going to find it easier to speak to their employers about their mental health and the situations that they're in?
It's not just employees as well. I think it's friends and the way we are, social media has got a lot of detractors, but it can be a power for good as well. People aren't alone. And I think you've got the stats, Melissa, but when I started out, people had their own employee assistance programs and they knew of Lionheart, but now they go to Lionheart because they see examples of where and I think that's part of the ambassador role, just to draw people's attention to say this is available. Going back to my own case, 10, 12 weeks waiting for counsel is not the fault of the NHS, it's just the pressure that's on the NHS. But I didn't even think when I first spoke to the GP about picking up the phone to Lionheart. But once I knew that was available, that saving in terms of getting to see somebody was absolutely massive. So that's where I see my role. Just be getting that message out there, and again, first step, do speak out. Just open up, whether that's to a friend, an employer. I think you'd be really surprised with the positive response that you get, because we all see it, don't we? Somebody doesn't seem to be acting the same way. Is it me? What's going on? And we don't want to pry into people's lives. So, it's really good for the person it's affecting to open up. It was like a real weight lifted off your shoulder. You feel like you're carrying it around, and this is me. This is what I'm experiencing. You'd be absolutely stunned about the same people who experience the same thing in their lives as well. So.
And you make a really good point there, Steve, because you were saying that things have changed quite a bit in terms of social media, in terms of even seeing people in the public eye who have opened up about mental health struggles or have been affected by mental health struggles. And I think it is making it more accessible to, I'd say, to our generation, because you're right, the generation above were very much stiff upper lip, just get on with it. And I think it has, in some respects, made it much harder for the children of that generation to open up. But I think things are changing. And the generation that probably are children are going to just think that it's very easy to open up about that. And it's, why wouldn't you talk about it? But you're right, having that ability to be very open with colleagues, friends, employers, I think is so important. That it becomes part of an open conversation, so that we don't shy away from it, and that we do actually, like you say, talk to people if we see them maybe not on their A game, maybe not feeling quite the way they should. That start that conversation, ask them how they are, and then wait for the response, and maybe even ask again. We've got into that situation like,
Yeah.
"How you doing?" "Oh, I'm fine." "Yeah, but how are you really doing?" And I think it's that follow up. People go, "Well, it's okay for me to open up," and I think that is so nice that you can have those conversations with people that you work with, people that you're friends with down the pub,
Mm-hmm.
going out and having a social event, but actually saying, "Do you know what, I'm not feeling all the ticket, and I think, there might be something wrong."
Yeah.
I think it's great that that we can open up about it now. I think that's been a major shift. And I think, like you were saying, with you being an ambassador, that's another way that we can show to the profession, to the surveying profession, which has traditionally been very, probably not quite so open, probably not a space that people feel, particularly men, feel that they can open up about their mental health difficulties. So having people like yourself and our other ambassadors that can talk about the difference that it made, being able to talk about it, I think is a bit of a beacon to everyone else that is potentially going through this. I think one of our ambassadors said once he'd opened up, it was like putting the weights down. It's like carrying the weights around all the time.
Absolutely get that analogy. Yeah, it's the best one you can come up with. And there was a very good example of that, using what's going on in the world around us. Because I'm of a certain age now, so adding 10 years on to when I was 38 when I had my diagnosis, you get the age that I am at the moment. We don't play football and run around as much anymore. So a group of friends, we go out walking once a week if we can. And sometimes we'll just have a bit of banter or take the mick out of each other or talk about football or whatever that may be. But every now and again, somebody will mention something, because it feels comfortable to do that. And WhatsApp groups, which generally share jokes or arranging where to meet or wherever that is. It was really interesting because my friends know sort of happened with me in the past. So sometimes they'll come and have a chat with me. But there's I don't know if you've heard of this, Melissa, I think we did a blog on it, but there's a cricketer called Graham Thorpe that took his own life quite suddenly and had ongoing issues with his mental health, but again, in his prime, probably one of the best cricketers England have ever produced, pressured situations, etc. But he took his own life, and his family were brave enough to discuss that. And then when we're on WhatsApp group, somebody put, "Blimey, Graham Thorpe took his own life." And within a few text messages, one of our friends came out, or leveraged the fact that the family had been brave enough to do that, to say, "Look, lads, I'm struggling as well. I can sort of see how he got to that situation." And from that moment on, again, dropping the weights, that really helped him significantly. He'd been carrying this around for weeks. Wasn't in work, got assistance from work, but the hardest bit was telling his friends and family. I think he told his wife, but probably by his own admission, probably not easy to live with because he was sharing it between him and his wife. And not saying that conversation helped him completely, but he told us it was such a relief to tell us as friends, and he went away and he's getting the support he wants. And I say, just by talking, it isn't a golden bullet. I'll still have times, and I check in with him. I think good to check in, but there are times where things reoccur. But I think, to manage it better, you know what to look out for a lot more, and you know that you can get past through those stages. So yeah, as I say, I think we did do a blog on that. I don't know whether we can share that.
Yeah, we can. And thank you for sharing that, Steve, because that's a really important point to make, isn't it? How something that was in the public eye from someone who most on the outside looking in would assume they probably had a perfect life, wife, children, fabulous career to look back on, great accolade, but really struggling. And for the family to come forward like that and share that is amazing. But then not only that, the opportunity then for someone else to open up on the back of that story is amazing. And that individual recognizing that they needed that help and that they needed to reach out to others, and that they've now got that support network. They know that they can rely on it.
Obviously, we're friends. We treated it in confidence, and the blog doesn't sort of allude to who it is, but he actually posted something similar on LinkedIn, and his wife had no idea that he was going to post something on LinkedIn. The actual response to him saying, "This is what's happened, this is what's been going on, this is how I'm addressing it," the responses were unbelievable. And most of them were, "Oh, I never realised you were going to this. Come and talk to me anytime you want." The outpouring of support was phenomenal on LinkedIn, and that's not usually a platform that's used for that, but it's definitely was a power for good, and might have encouraged somebody else to have a conversation. It's like a domino effect, isn't it? If they're prepared to do it, then I'll either speak to them or speak to somebody because I want to get ahead of it. So yeah, it's like a snowball. I think we're going in the right direction, and our generation can make it easier for the next generation. So.
Like you said back at the beginning, if even we could help one person, we'll have done a really, really good job. And I'm sure you've probably helped many in amongst those that are listening today. If you are speaking to someone now, if there's someone out there listening now that is potentially in a really tight situation, is struggling with their mental health, is not sure which way to go next, what would your advice to them be?
It's a bit of a process. I think when you've got that realization, it's what to do with it. If you're fortunate enough to be in a strong family that care about you, not fortunately not everybody is, but that would be definitely my first port of call, because they might be wondering why you're acting a little differently or not engaged. Might make perfect sense to them, and if they love you and they want to support you, it's not a burden to them. They're there for you through thick and thin. And I think that's one thing I had at the time. We've all got challenges in life, and you think, oh, they're having a bit of a rough time. I don't want to burden them. So I would go there to start with, and see what's available to you. Lionheart isn't obvious. People that listen to Lionheart know of Lionheart. You're there. They know of your services, which are exemplary, really good people that are there for you. Look at employee assistance programs. All the common bits is sharing it. It's not going out to alternative routes. I mean, I try to mask it. I think some people can throw themselves into things just to sort of distract themselves, like social media or becoming obsessive around other things to take their mind away from the actual problem. Talking. That's the only thing I would probably say. Talking and looking at your options from there on in. If you need other forms of support from your GP, etc., medication, that's not something that should be frowned upon. Fortunately, I didn't get to that point. It was sort of offered, but when I went back to the GP eventually and to talk about what they could do for me in terms of counselling, they said, "Oh, you've had your cancer diagnosis now, Steve. It sounds like you've got enough on your plate to worry about that." So, but yeah, I think the diagnosis pushed me into talking more about it. So yeah, talk. I think I would say.
Talk. I like that. I like that a lot. And I think giving people that initial permission to just start that conversation with someone that you trust, someone that you're close to, whoever that might be, but just talk to someone and just share that experience with what you're going through.
And I think as a recipient, sort of the person that's being talked to, give the people the space. Don't try and don't try and solutionize things. Just let them talk it through. I think probably when I opened up, I was exhausted afterwards. Probably best night's sleep I ever had the next night, because I was my mind was on the go all the time. So if you're the person that's been trusted to listen, it's hard because you want to try and solutionize, but listen to let people talk it all through, even the irrational stuff. Just let them pour it out, and then you can be on hand to try and help them going forward. So.
Yeah, and of course you did mention about Lionheart, and if people don't feel that they can open up to those closer to them, we are here. We are on the end of a phone. You will get to speak to one of our support team who can guide you through next steps. And we're just here to listen as well. We're not here to run into solution mode or to just pass you off. We really are here to sit and listen and take you by the hand and lead you through the initial steps. So it was fantastic to hear that you got the benefit of talking to Lionheart, and hopefully anyone else that's out there listening to this will know that we're there to help them as well through this difficult patch, and help them get through the dark bits. and hopefully come out the other side, which would be absolutely fantastic. Steve, it's been an absolute pleasure today. I know that we both agreed that we could probably be talking for quite some time on this subject, and it may be that we do a follow-up at some point in the future, because your story, I think, has really resonated with a lot of the staff and a lot of the team here at Lionheart, and it's one that we always remember, and it's one that once shared, I think is very difficult to forget, and I think it's really special. So thank you for taking the time to share it with us today, and hopefully now it's in a much wider audience now as part of a podcast, and a lot more people are going to get to hear it, which is great. And I hope that it does help those that are listening. So thank you so much for your time, Steve. It's been a real pleasure. No doubt we'll be speaking to each other again soon, but other than that, thanks for your time.
No, excellent for listening, Melissa. Always happy to support. I can. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Steve. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for joining us on Lionheart Talks, and we hope you've enjoyed the episode. Subscribe now on your favorite podcast platform to hear from us again, and don't forget you can find out more about how we're helping surveyors and their families on our website, lionheart.org.uk.